Tom Quee presents The Royle Ramble, an episode-by-episode celebration of the classic British sitcom, The Royle Family. To get in touch with the show, email us at theroyleramblepod@gmail.com. Hello everyone, it's Tom Quee here, back for another edition of The Royle Ramble, my Royle Family Deep Dive podcast. I hope you're well, have you had your teas, etc. Now, today is the first episode of the third series of the show. I can't believe we've quite got here, it's been a long old road, there's been a few gaps in between, but I'm determined now, I'm going to see it out all the way until we get to the dreaded specials. So, you know the score, follow us on YouTube, Spotify, iTunes, leave a review, theroyleramblepod@gmail.com if you want to get in touch with the show as well. I've got two great emails I'm going to read out quickly before we get into the analysis. And naturally, the main thing that I want to talk about at the top of the show is the Patreon. So if you enjoy the show, you want to give back to the show, you want to help keep the lights on the show, then the Patreon's the best way to do it. And basically what it does is it gives you premium access to the show. So you're currently listening to the first episode of Series 3, but on the first of the month for our Patreon listeners, they get the next episode a month ahead. So they get the Babysitting Again episode whilst you get Hello Baby David. So yeah, if you really dig what we do over here and you want to give back and you want to get that sort of premium access, then that's the best way to do it. So just before we get to our discussion of the opener of Season 3, let's get into some emails. And our first email comes from Phil. Phil, you may remember, was on the show for one of our quiz episodes back in the day, and definitely go back and check out all those quiz episodes. They're so fun to put together, and indeed, if you want to come on for a quiz edition, I'm always looking to do them. I'm actually on Series 3 right now, fittingly. Get in touch with us, theroyleramblepod@gmail.com. And Phil begins, "Hey Tom, just listened to your podcast episode on the 1999 Christmas special, well worth the wait. Looking forward to you getting your teeth into Series 3, which is probably my favourite. I loved your discussion about Christmas chocolates and how back then you would have got a lot more for your money. Incidentally, do you remember Snowflakes? A great chocolate bar that, for reasons only known to Cadbury's, got axed after just a few years. Such a shame. When I did the quiz episode with you, I thought about mentioning the close of this episode as a kind of sad moment. By this stage, we've been with the Royals for 13 episodes, and we know them quite well, almost like friends. It's therefore only natural to want to go with them when they leave for the hospital. Instead, we are left alone in the living room, and I always find myself glued to the screen as the credits roll in this episode, hoping that they get to the hospital okay, that Denise gives birth without any problems, and that Anthony gets to hear the news. It's a lovely but emotional close to the series, and having a son of mine born almost a year ago, I can relate to it well. Anyways, when you read this, you'll be about to launch into Series 3. Looking forward to hearing your thoughts on Ready Steady Cook, Sausage and Mash, British chat shows, Lou Bega, and much more. All the best, Phil." And yeah, thanks again, Phil, for getting in touch. I don't remember the Snowflake, I have to be honest with you. Apparently it was launched in August 2000 from just a little bit of research here, so it would have been in my wheelhouse of chocolate recognition. But no, doesn't ring any bells. For anyone not aware, the Snowflake is basically a flake with white chocolate inside, covered in smooth milk chocolate, kind of producing that kind of twirl-like aesthetic. They look lovely. And apparently doing a bit of research, Anthea Turner and her husband Grant Bovitt, we're getting into a bloody Royle Ramble episode now, they promoted the Snowflake at their wedding for some reason with OK Magazine, so that's wild. But yeah, the Snowflake, and if we're talking like forgotten chocolate bars or chocolate things, anyone remember, I think they're called Astros, they were really, really nice. And I used to also like, Boosts are around, aren't they? But Boosts aren't like in the top tier of chocolate bars like I think they should be. Picnics as well are great. But awesome to hear from you, Phil, and don't worry, I have a lot on Ready Steady Cook and Sausage and Mash in this episode. Okay, and our final email comes from Adam, who's a new correspondent. Adam says, "Hi Tom, just to say that I really enjoy the podcasts. I don't remember when I first watched the show. I was born in 1989, so it was always on in the background, and I kind of just grew up with it. In a way, it was the forerunner of Gogglebox, a chance to delve into the ordinary atmosphere of a living room and get to know a family and their personalities. Sadly, the later specials were a great disappointment. The clan had become caricatures of themselves. In the new sofa, Denise asked Barbara how to dissolve an OXO cube, and Dave is seen in the bath with the still frozen turkey. It seemed a little over the top, and it was also disheartening to see our beloved family ageing. Also, in Joe's Crackers, Anthony had become a bit too successful and dull for my liking. Anyway, thank you Caroline for granting us a great sitcom which is still so loved by young and old. For me, it's quite like comfort food. God bless, Adam." Thanks, Adam. Great to hear from you. And and it's interesting, the Gogglebox link, isn't it? Obviously, Caroline was the original narrator, and now we have Craig Cash. And I'm quite a fan of Gogglebox, really. For one, I just like kind of catching up on TV I wouldn't normally see. And yeah, the family aspect is there. And of course, it is kind of a spiritual successor, even though it's a different format to the Royle Family, and it has all that kind of lineage. And arguably, I'm trying to think of some of the families off the top of my head, like the Malones and stuff like that. They are like the Royals, and that's where they're reacting to what's on the TV. Maybe I'll have to do a little little episode or a little bonus thing in the future about Gogglebox and the Royle family. I mean, it won't last too long, but just for my own personal enjoyment, I want to research that. And so funny as well, Adam. I mean, I mentioned at the top of the episode, didn't I, about the specials, about kind of dreading getting into it. And most of the Royle Ramble listeners that email into me that I chat with, they kind of concur. People don't really seem to like these specials. And in the same way, there's that term jumping the shark, where it's kind of like, when a show goes off the rails and kind of abandons what made it great. And it's a direct reference to Happy Days, I believe, when Arthur Fonzarelli, the Fonz, jumps over a shark. We kind of have that in the new Sofa, but rather than jumping the shark, it's bathing the turkey, because yes, that scene with Dave and the turkey, it's just not the Royle family, is it? It's just isn't what we would conceive of the show to be. It's not why we love this show. It has no trace of kind of the genius, but thankfully we've still got all of series 3 to get through, and indeed another Christmas special and the Queen of Sheba. And look, as well, I'm still going to put the same effort, the same research, the same passion into these new specials. Of course I am, and I'm not going to be constantly negative about them. Well, maybe I might. I need to kind of reevaluate them, I think, and they're all a bit longer, aren't they, as well? So we'll see how that goes. But yeah, Adam, thanks so much for getting in touch, and Phil. And again, guys, if you want to reach out to me, the royleramblepod@gmail.com, if you want to come on for a quiz show, or if you just want to chat, how did you get into the show, your history of the show, any thoughts on anything I've said. Always great to hear from you, and I'll read them out at the top of the episodes. But yeah, that's enough of the housekeeping. Let's get into the rambling. So this is Hello Baby David, written by Carolyn Ahern and Craig Cash, interestingly no third writer in this case, and directed by Carolyn Ahern. And it originally aired on the 16th of October 2000, getting 9.93 million views in the UK. So we open on written by Carolyn Ahern and Craig Cash, and Jim is speaking over the top, claiming how much he never gets tired of looking at someone who, at this point, is unseen, claiming that this person is gorgeous. And it's classic Royle family from the off here, isn't it? We know this show well by this point. We know he's not going to be speaking of someone that we might typically expect. Not Barb, for example, his doting wife. And there's a nice stylistic switch here with the black of the title screen, written by Carolyn Ahern and Craig Cash, with that being replaced with the black of the back of a mirror, one Jim is holding in front of himself, and whose reflection that Jim is speaking directly to because, well, of course it was himself, wasn't it? And we haven't really seen this side of Jim, though, before. The ego. Never in the prior two series did I ever feel that he felt he was good looking. I imagine Jim cares very little about his appearance. I mean, we can see that, it's evidence there. I mean, clearly he doesn't physically, but, in himself, his soul, But then again, we've only spent 13 episodes with this family, despite it feeling like seasons and seasons. I mean, the depth of it is just incredible. And Jim, of course, as always, likes to be a little wry. He tends towards the Joker role.
I never get tired of looking at you. You're gorgeous, you are.
So Jim is holding the mirror because he's been getting a haircut from Barb. And this just naturally scans. I mean, you'd figure this would be something that Jim wouldn't want to spend money on. And he probably waits and waits until his hair's at the point of no return. And in reality, of course, Ricky Tomlinson rocks the long locks. So it feels very on brand for the character. So I'm sure Jim wouldn't go to the barber's seeing it as a swizz or whatever, nor would he ever get someone to come over to his place like Sandy Scissors. Nope, Jim has his own Sandy Scissors, his own in-home barber in Barbara. She's done a good job too. I mean, there's no real styling going on Jim's bonds. It's his hair as we always know it. But I like the fact that this series opens, the first shot we see is Jim being renewed somewhat for another 6 episodes of miserly conduct. The TV, of course, is on from the start in the background, burbling, and on Jim's shoulders is a lank tea towel, which has caught some of his hair. This being his only covering as he's getting the cut. None of that apron bib malarkey that supercuts alike would do. Jim then indulges himself further in the mirror with a kiss, winks at himself and thanks Barbara for saving a nice couple of quid there. He passes the mirror across to his wife and intensely shakes off the tea towel covered in his greasy hair down onto the floor. It really seems to bother him, and he wrenches a little like a kid trying to get comfortable. He's impatient. He rubs himself down and then moves off, Barbara, of course, returning the chair back. And as we'd expect with this household by this point, the hair isn't collected or swept up. It'll be something that Barbara gets to later, she says, when she's got a minute. And we can see in the background behind the two as well that the place is even more cluttered than usual, with clothes on racks and draped across the backs of seats. Obviously, we know that everything has changed forever with the arrival of the baby, but how exactly it has changed isn't made clear immediately in the episode. I suppose the inference of all of Jim's coddling that opens the episode is we're meant to think that he's talking to little David. I mean, he is talking to someone who is babied, I guess. However, when Jim sits down and pops his collar, we can see something entirely new. it's a little shot of a baby. I mean, it must be the baby. In a nice little white frame there, sitting in pride of place beside Jim, where his newspaper and the remote normally reside. We haven't cut to the TV itself yet, it's still playing on in the background, of course. And Barb asks if there's now on. Jim confirms it's the usual shite and that they'll have to get Sky soon, which nicely sets up what happens at the end of this series with the second Christmas special. Sky UK Limited is a British broadcaster and telecommunications company that provides television and broadband internet services, as well as fixed line and mobile telephone services to consumers and businesses in the United Kingdom. It is a subsidiary of Sky Group and from 2018 onwards part of Comcast. It is the UK's largest pay TV broadcaster with 12.7 million customers as of the end of 2019 for its digital satellite TV platform. Sky B's digital service, which is what Jim's making reference to here, was officially launched on the 1st of October 1998 under the name Sky Digital. Now, I remember it being called Sky Digital. I'm pretty sure there were like some Chris Tarrant adverts where he was trying to sell them and he was like in a warehouse or something. It's kind of hazy there, but I do recall Sky Digital. At the time, the use of the Sky Digital brand made an important distinction between the new service and Sky's analogue service. Key selling points were the improvement in picture and sound quality, increased number of channels, and an interactive service branded Open, later called Sky Active. Within 30 days, over 100,000 digiboxes have been sold, which helped bolster Sky B's decision to give away free digiboxes and mini dishes from May 1999. And then it's classic Royal Family next, as they dig deep into blatantly wrong statements.
I'm going to have to get Sky, you know, Barb.
Oh, Jim, we don't want Sky. We don't watch telly enough to get the value.
It reminds me of the last episode, the first Christmas special that we covered, where Jim says it's the only day of the year that they get together and watch TV, and there's nothing on. They've not got long to ponder the worthiness of Sky, though, as the doorbell soon rings, and Jim, of course, ushers his long-suffering wife off to open the door. Jim laughs at the TV and confirms to us as viewers what's on, says Anne Robinson my arse, and insults her liberally. Watchdog, he asks. I am watching a bloody dog, and then guffaws further to himself cheerfully. And Anne Robinson, Anne Josephine Robinson, is an English television presenter and journalist. She was the host of the BBC game show The Weakest Link from 2000 to 2012 and then 2017. And she has presented the Channel 4 game show Countdown since the 28th of June 2021, taking over from Nick Hewer. I'm quite an Anne fan, I have to say. Like, you know, I'm not anti like Jim. I remember watching Weakest Link a lot when I was younger. It was kind of on at tea time on BBC Two. And I always quite liked her wit. And like, I really appreciate, I like it in my comedy, I like it in my drama, maybe it shows who I am as a person. I like a bit of nastiness, I like a little bit of a sting there, we need less Fern Cottons and more Anne Robinsons in my eyes. And Anne, interesting, her Wikipedia page, very intriguing, she's received lots of complaints. In 2001, she was accused of hatred towards the Welsh, after describing them as irritating and annoying, while appearing as a guest on Room 101. And apparently on The Weakest Link, she made former Blue Peter presenter John Noakes cry after asking what was the end for Shep. And Shep had of course been Noakes' pet dog, both on and off Blue Peter. And Watchdog is a British consumer investigative journalism programme broadcast on BBC One from 1985 to 2019. The programme focused on investigating complaints and concerns made by viewers and consumers over problematic experiences with traders, retailers and other companies around the UK over customer services, product security and possible fraudulent criminal behaviour. The show's long-standing slogan was, the programme you cannot afford to miss. So who's coming into the house? It's Dave and Denise, of course, with someone else in tow as well. But first Denise enters, proper glammed up with her hair styled on top. Not looking like she just gave birth at all. I mean, she didn't in reality, but you know what I'm getting at. Again, it's not quite clear the timeline here, and I'm terrible with guessing babies' ages, but I'd say it's been a few months at least. Really chuckling with maternal mirth there. Jim refers to them as Posh and Bex, and before we can meet the baby, we hear Barb cooing over him in the hallway. And Posh and Bex, of course, that's a widely used nickname for the British celebrity super couple, Victoria Beckham, née Adams, of the Spice Girls, and David Beckham, the world footballer. Posh and Bex as a phrase was included in the Collins Concise English Dictionary in 2001, and the term Posh and Bex is commonly used by newspapers and other media, especially in headlines, and has become an expression that is widely used and recognised within popular culture in the United Kingdom. Now, whenever I think of Posh and Bex, I always think of Stuart Francis's joke that I think was named as the funniest joke of the Edinburgh Fringe. I mean, what a genius Stuart Francis is. And his joke, you know who really gives kids a bad name? Posh and Bex. So all Denise was carrying as she entered was a complex do on her head. Dave, however, has clearly gotten properly stuck in, as he said he would in Series 2. He comes in awkwardly, holding a big tub of baby stuff, as well as little David himself. Baby David, a little baby. You know, how wonderful to see him on screen. I mean, just think about this for a second. Dave and Denise have a child. Like, at this point, you can't help but feeling like you've grown with this family somewhat. I certainly do. And little David, he clearly has had all the best right out the womb. His little baby booties emblazoned with the Nike swoosh as he passes in front of the camera, a corduroy jacket on, and seemingly some sort of do-rag like a Compton gang member would rock. The camera just hangs on him for a moment too, which is lovely, allowing us to fully absorb this moment. It doesn't cut right away to everyone and their reactions, as of course this isn't quite as new to them as it is to us. Rather, it lingers as Dave eventually comes into frame and sweetly greets him, calls him Daddy's little soldier and picks him up into his arms. And this was the right decision. Allow a bit of time to be cleaved between the birth to establish a new order. Between the birth to the next episode of the opening of the first series to establish a new order. We could have had something about Denise coming back from the hospital as our first episode of series 3, but I think this was wiser, to start it here. So Jim asks for Dave to pass him across, needing some reassurance amidst the handling that he doesn't want to shite little baby David, before holding him in his arms and really clearly cherishing him. And, Jim is like any family member when they hold a newborn, exclaiming how alike the two of them look, even taking his glasses off and putting them on David, which, again, is classic. The family seated across from Jim, though, don't like that opinion, don't like that inference of Jim's that they're similar. They're clearly unnerved by the thought of baby David being a mini-me of Jim, and understandably so. God forbid, Barbara laughs to herself. And yeah, the baby's called David as well. I mean, no Keanu, no Whitney. Dave had sort of discussed the lineage before in series 2 and stuff like that. And it's just perfect them, isn't it? That, they had these big dreams, Denise and Dave, but eventually they just called the baby Dave as well. Well, David, but, same thing. Neither Dave, Denise or Barb, though, are much interested in Jim cuddling his... They're much more interested in the telly as Ready Steady Cook is coming on. Something Jim, like what baby David does each day, immediately poo-poos, changing it over before Barb puts her foot down and it goes back on. Ready Steady Cook is a BBC daytime TV gaming show, and it debuted in October 94, and the last original edition was broadcast on February 2010. The programme was hosted by Fern Britton from 94 until 2000, and that was when celebrity chef Ainsley Harriott became the new host. In August 2000, when Harriott took over, the duration of the programme was extended from 30 to 45 minutes. And, I must say, I'm a huge Ainsley Harriott fan. I mean, we've sort of touched on Ainsley before. Ainsley Harriott's bathroom was mentioned by Barbara, but yeah, I got a bit of a soft spot for Ainsley, I must say. And Ready Steady Cook as well. I kind of remember this being on, like it was pretty omnipresent back in the day. Like maybe it was kind of on around the same time as Weakest Link, even. And it's not something that I return to regularly, but I will say the concept of having to make stuff up on the spot. So if anyone's not familiar with the show, one of the things they do is the contestants bring in ingredients, just like a grab bag of things, and the chefs have to come up with ideas. And I always thought that was kind of fun, actually. They kind of illustrate what could be done with some ginger and some chocolate or whatever. And the voting was cool as well. So when the show came back, when they did the sort of reboot or whatever, they did it with the red button, everyone just had a little clicker in the hand, and that's not that fun. But however, in the original show, I used to really like this, the preparations were voted on by the audience, who each held up a card showing either a red tomato or a green pepper. And basically, Ainsley or Fern would sort of work out who had the majority there. And it did get me thinking, and I sort of Googled this and went on YouTube and stuff, but to no avail. Was there ever like a true 50-50 split, between the audience? I guess, how would you judge that by the eye? So Jim didn't want to watch this show, got some pushback, but he needs to push back himself a little, though. He goes back into the classic topic of Denise's cooking, imagines her on the show with 2 slices of Dairy Lee and some Mighty White. Dave laughs, as does baby David. Well, I mean, it's Jim, of course, but he clearly is relishing being a granddad, and it's so endearing, really. I mean, so many people can be so nonplussed around tots, but not Jim.
You having that, baby David? Yes. I love this fella. Yeah, Bob.
I love this fella, he says, which always warms my heart, his voice deep with adoration. But it's worth noting that he's saying that pretty much as he passes baby David across, wanting his cuddle, but not the responsibility. So the baby comes to Barb, she kisses him, and then as a mother herself, thinks instinctively to pass the baby son to its mother. But Denise, Denise, she just kind of says hiya, brief and clipped. Barely looks at her offspring before David is passed to Dave, who really takes him into a deserved parental embrace. And we knew this was going to happen, didn't we? Even before hearing she was pregnant in Series 1, it was clear where Denise's priorities lay. Squarely with herself. I mean, she's selfish. undeniably, but perhaps motherhood, that which she was so ardently preparing for, perhaps that would have revealed a whole caring new side to her that we'd never seen before, like what Barb imagined Jim would show after leaving work. But just like as Barb says to Denise herself in that classic Series 2 episode, there isn't one. It's played for laughs, of course, but it's a depressing moment in actuality. Denise laughs a little nervously, at least that's how I heard it, as David's past the baby. She coos a little to her mom, saying, "Ah," but yeah, baby David, very well behaved baby David, I must say, is passed off from person to person until he lands in his chair. And as Dave gets up to pop him into his baby chair, which is on Anthony's chair, we can finally see the TV for the first time this episode. And it's a great angle, this as well. The Xmas decorations are down, of course, but there's a few new additions, like a set of colourful frames above the mantle that I imagine house a few more baby David snaps. We can also see the influence of the tot already on the room, as hanging off of Jim's side table is some child's toy of sort, you know, the kind of Mattel Fisher-Price type vibe. And just like how in the 5th episode of the first series, Another Woman, back when Dave and Denise weren't even married, let alone parents, just like how then we saw Dave taking off his clothes, mirrored on the box by that ungodly late-night Davina McCall show. Well, here a chef can be seen on Ready Steady Cook, rising up and celebrating on the tube as Dave himself is stooped over, reassuring baby David that he can watch the telly now. I mean, he's a royal, all right, that's for sure. Dave then slunks back to his seat. Jim watches a TV with his arms crossed. Baby David too is seemingly taking in Fern and friends. But before we learn what people are cooking on the show, Barb asks what Dave and Denise had for their tea because, of course she did. And steak and kidney pie, well, it's a savoury pie that is filled principally with a mixture of diced beef, diced kidney, fried onion and brown gravy. Steak and kidney pie is a classic representative dish of British cuisine. Now, I was looking into the history of steak and kidney pie, and this is from an excellent National Geographic article that breaks it all down. Quote, "The first written recipe for a steak and kidney pie in 1694's The Complete Cook doesn't bear much resemblance to the pie we know today, with its ingredient list featuring lamb, prunes, currants and nutmeg. The first mention of the modern dish is less than appetising. Charles Dickens' first novel, The Pickwick Papers, features a pie man who boasts of keeping his prices low by making pies from kittens. Dickens' reference suggests the combination had become a stalwart of the pie man's menu, minus One Hopes the Cats, by 1836, and recipes for beefsteak and kidney pie appear in countless cookbooks from 1851's The Frugal Cook onwards." The camera then hangs on Barb for a second as she watches the screen as some exciting contestant introduction music plays through. And it's something interesting to consider that the writers in each subsequent season after the first established something new within the family to mine comedy gold from. In the second, it was Denise's pregnancy, and now it's baby David and Denise's complete ignorance and stupidity in the face of motherhood. So Barb asks how the night went, and Denise says that she slept right through. Something Jim doesn't say anything to, but you can tell he's a little shocked here that his daughter would mistake what was being asked of her in such an egregious manner. When Barb clarifies that she's asking about her baby, she simply says she doesn't know, with Dave having to inform Grandma that he woke up twice. "Oh, did he?" Denise says, and Barb looks proper disturbed by this for a second, perhaps thinking that Denise would eventually get into the flow of things, but clearly she isn't sacrificing her hard-earned slumber for nobody, offspring or not. And then Barb gets distracted by the person who made her sad, Denise, who tells her mother that herself and Dave have actually done something nice, and with actual forethought. They've opened up a savings account for baby David for when he goes to university. Jim says uni my arse, of course, saying he hopes the baby has his mother's brains. And apparently there's £26 in there in the fund. There's 25 from Dave's parents and the pound from Jim. I mean, Jesus, Jim. You might as well have given nothing. You know, sometimes the thought can count more than the actual gift itself. They're going to put money in there every now and then, Denise says, but they are still paying off things like the exercise bike that Denise never uses. And again, here's Denise's hypocrisy, because she complained about the old fizzy moped taking up space and, you know, apparently it was in bits or whatever. But I bet the exercise bike is pretty much the same. You know, Denise is nothing if not contradictory. Jim then insults Denise here, but in effect kind of insulting himself, saying that getting on the bike with me, getting off her arse, and that isn't easy for Denise. Naturally not easy for him either, as we've seen with his constant doorbell dodging. There's a silence for a second, which is then ruptured by the baby crying. Barb cringes a bit, surmises that he probably needs feeding. Dave agrees, glances at his wife's bust and asks her if she wants him to pass the baby across. Something she should instinctively be doing herself, to be honest. "Oh, all right," she huffs, as if this isn't her duty, her obligation, and something she should enjoy, I suppose, you know, in some ways a bonding exercise of sorts. And as Dave rises and gets the baby, Barb looks to Jim, worried, who is equally concerned. And, I don't think this is about, there's a crying baby here. It's more that, our daughter, who is now a mother, is still a selfish baby. So Denise unbuttons and fastens the child onto her bosom. Jim is disgusted himself, but to be honest, he's blasted the room non-stop with his own body natural smells for years, so why should he begrudge his daughter feeding his first grandson? Barbara shoots a look to Jim, probably knowing that he's going to be really up in arms about this, but, he's seemingly lost for words. We then hear a key turn in the door, and Jim is worried.
You're not leaving that out, are you, Denise? This could be any bloody body.
Dad, it's only natural.
Well, so's having a crap, but you wouldn't do that in the lounge, would you?
Oh, Jim. Hello.
Hello.
Hi, Dad.
Anthony enters with Darren in tow, and Barbara really lights up when she sees Darren. Yeah, Barb really seems happy to see him. Darren, who enters with a smile, pauses for a second as he notices the breastfeeding and then perches on the edge of Ant's seat. Is a process by which human breast milk is fed to a child. Breast milk may be from the breast or may be expressed by hand or pumped and fed to the infant. The World Health Organization recommends that breastfeeding begin within the first hour of a baby's life and continue as often and as much as the baby wants. After the introduction of foods at 6 months of age, recommendations include continued breastfeeding until 1 to 2 years of age or more. Globally, about 38% of infants are exclusively breastfed during their first 6 months of life. And we're seeing Denise do it here, but the first depiction of breastfeeding on television had actually occurred 23 years prior at this point, and was in the children's programme Sesame Street in 1977. So Darren sat down with Ant now, and Barb being Barb, she's the inquisitive mother. She asked Darren if he still has his warehouse job, but he got fired off, he says. And I love how he doesn't really look at Barbara, even though she's talking directly to him. He's kind of, the tractor beam of ready, steady, go is just pulling him back. He'll say something and then look back, say something and then look back.
Are you still working?
No.
Oh, what happened there then? That was a good job in that warehouse.
They fired me off.
Right.
They caught me nicking.
Oh, you daft sod. What were you nicking?
A fridge freezer.
Well, they're not easy to put up your bloody jumper, are they?
They caught him nicking, we learn. A fridge freezer, no less. It's not easy to put that up your shirt, Jim says, which is fair. But Darren isn't interested, is a little bit more clandestine. He's looking at something else coming out of a shirt. We can see him smirking, spying Denise's boob. And, Denise, obviously because she's a bit older than Anthony and Darren and all that, I bet she was fancied quite a bit by Anthony's mates, And yeah, I kind of skirted past that, but Darren in the fridge freezer, I mean, it kind of says it all, doesn't it? So Barbara lets Ant know that there's dinner in the oven, sausage and mash, she says, with real glee and warmth. I mean, as always, how can you not love Barbara? And Ant, ever the mate, asks if he can whack it with Darren, as in share it. And Barb concurs, of course, saying to make up some bread and butter with it. And the dialect and dialogue here is just sublime, isn't it? The words they have these characters say, the way they make them talk. Darren didn't get sacked, he got fired off. Anthony asks if he can whack it with Darren, not share it. I mean, I'm not saying these are particularly northern phrases or whatever, though they probably are. It's more just that they're so individualised and lovingly curated. Denise turns to him, asks about his own dearest, Emma, and we hear that she's going to Jazzbo's tonight with her mum and dad for a meal for his birthday. So yeah, there's another reference to Jazzbo's. I didn't realise when I was making the Anthony's birthday notes that it came up again. Obviously, we heard it in Emma's last appearance, the final episode of Series 2. So yeah, it's a bar or restaurant or something, swanky enough for Roger and his family to decamp to, and no doubt one that caters to vegetarians. And Ant wasn't invited. He delivers the no kind of solemnly, but I guess he didn't really expect himself to go, I mean, I guess Emma was invited to his birthday thing, so then Barbara expects maybe he'd be invited for Roger's, It's not really a favour sort of thing. It's just kind of the families growing close together. But it is his birthday too, Roger's, so maybe he just wants to be with his daughter and wife. You don't necessarily need gawky Anthony there, who no doubt would have been charming dinner company, I'm sure. But Jim sees an in here, sees a weakness, so he digs in, of course having something to say.
Oh, weren't you invited, Anthony?
No.
Oh.
Well, they don't want him spoiling a romantic evening with his gob all covered in tomato ketchup, do they?
Jim, don't be so horrible.
And Darren's laughter there. I mean, we've explored Darren's laughter before, and it's so relatable, isn't it? Think of the times when you've been around the fathers or elders of friends that you're not really familiar with. And, Darren laughs indulgently because it's funny, as a put down, but also because it's coming from the father of his friend, which is a bit more unusual than the standard banter, I suppose. And also, as well, on top of that, it shows that everyone's at ease and friendly, everyone's having a good laugh here. There's no awkwardness around. And there's quite a mix in the room now here, too. There's not only baby David in the medley, but Anthony and Darren as well. There's a great swirl of performances. And Darren, Andrew Wyman, this is kind of his breakout episode, really. Obviously, he was in the past one. He was in Anthony's birthday, and he really made an impact there. But clearly, the writers, the crew really liked him, wanted to use him more. And his performance is just stellar. That kind of aquiline, that tightness, the tautness, the honed-in approach, that really marks his body language out. His sportswear, too, is brilliant. The white striped top beneath the sports jacket and necklace. The type of jacket that hugs around the wrists. The sort of jacket that isn't really capable of hiding a fridge nor a freezer. They're very similar in their aesthetic as a whole here, Ant and old Mr. Sinclair Jones. And, Darren laughs, as we said. Darren laughs, looks at Jim twice, laughing, really laughing. Maybe recognising here in some sort of subconscious mode that he's missing a bit of this relationship with his own father. And I focus so much on Darren here because Darren features heavily in this episode. And, I love the exploration of his past here, shown via Jim's questioning.
When's your Kenny due after Dick, Darren?
I don't know.
Must be soon, though, mustn't it, lad?
Don't know.
When's your Kenny due out of the nick, Darren? So colloquial there and satisfyingly executed. Not only the your preposition, like our kid as well, but Nick as prison, and Kenny feels even more situated in that world than me. Like, everyone thinks of Dalgleish and stuff like that, but Kenny, there's just lots of Kennys up north, definitely less than down south. So Darren doesn't really know. We know that he's hopeless, gormless, ignorant, not only about his own life, but the lives of the loved ones close to him. Think about the expressions of him and his mother in Anthony's birthday. And like Barbara in that last interaction with Darren that we just mentioned, here Jim seems to know a little more than he lets on at the top. It must be soon, though, he says, so perhaps Kenny's been away for a while. People have known when he was due back, roughly. It's been whispered around the feathers, the precinct, the pear tree. It's a little unexplained, the crime as a whole, but the core truths are laid out painfully and cleanly, in that this seems to be something serious, as confirmed by Darren when Jim asks further.
Is he coming back round here to live?
Nah, they can't.
Yeah, it's best not to, eh?
Oh, I absolutely love that for so many reasons. First, it's as funny as it is to me dark and macabre, both in the realities of what has happened and that everyone knows about it. And that slightly pained, forceful way Darren delivers that, nah, he can't, the closed body language as he's perched. Beside him, Anthony, still just watching TV, not really taking notice. And Barbara just nods solemnly. She knows exactly why he can't. They all do. And what do you reckon he did, dear listeners? There's a few things that we can imagine here, but it's just deliciously pitch in the way that it's done. And it's almost like that clip, like this moment, is from a Ken Loach or a Mike Leigh type offering. It's sincere and deep and so much said, yet little truly revealed. And I've said this before on the show, but a recent British film that I would urge everyone listening to this podcast to seek out is called Ray and Liz. And it's set in the 70s, it's Dudley, it's bleak, it's got Tony Way in it, who plays Lenny in Afterlife, he's amazing in it, it's an extraordinary film. So yeah, it's that film, Ken Loach, Mike Leigh, this whole grittish, gritty British kind of thing. Like, that's why I like this moment with Darren's brother, because it's just like, God, what did happen? Just feels like something out of a kitchen sink drama rather than a primetime BBC comedy that was watched by millions. So it was all laughter for a second with the ketchup at Jazzbo's, but now Darren's receiving a bit of a lecture. Rightfully so, perhaps, and certainly for the right reasons, but undeniably the tone has shifted. And throughout all this, Denise is mothering baby David close as Barbara extends her own maternal powers of concern over to Darren.
Hey, Darren, you want to watch yourself nicking fridges? You'll end up inside with all your other brothers.
It was a fridge freezer, Barbara.
Oh.
Go and get some scran, Darren.
End up inside like all your other brothers. She means the best there, but that's a harsh way of putting it. But I suppose if all your other brothers were in the nick, then you'd warn the last one left. It kind of seems fair, kind of seems like your duty. And they're warning him as much as they're warning Anthony, I suppose. But damn, that's some lineage of the Sinclair Joneses in the Sing Sing, She's only genuinely concerned, but Darren tries to be smart there, doesn't he, I guess? What with confirming it's a fridge freezer rather than just a fridge. But yeah, I mean, no points scored there. Anthony reads the room and gets them out of there for some scran. And scran, I mean, that's such a word, isn't it? I discovered that going to uni. I know everyone says scran these days, but there was a guy on my floor, Cal, a true mank, and he introduced me to scran, things being west, bear, etc. So many great words. So the boys rise. Darren happily then stares right down at Denise in plain view as he passes from behind, not hiding it. Goofy smirk across his face as he is in no doubt plain view of Jim as he does it. And I mean, you know, of course he does it, but still, the temerity. He's destined for the inside at this point, maybe he thinks, so he might as well look at his mate's sister's tits. Seeing an opportunity, Jim asks for a brew as they both leave, and also asks for Darren to be watched with the fridge freezer. Barb says as they're gone that she can't imagine Darren carrying a big fridge freezer, and Jim succinctly surmises that, well, that's why he got caught. They then laugh it up some more. I mean, it is a farcical tale, of course, but it's somehow believable, given Darren's clearly quite impulsive behaviour at times, a la the end of Anthony's birthday. Ready Steady Cook plays loudly and returns back to the fore as we then cut into the kitchen. And man, why is Darren sitting like this? He's like a cartoon character, like, get this episode up and check out his stance here, you know. He's positioned with his knife and fork in each hand, hunched over his plate. I mean, this is a kind of mode, a design that I've seen Shaggy and Scooby and Fred Flintstone do from young, you know. And I'm sure most people would have just dished it up for themselves or whatever, but Darren is served by Anthony, the sausage and mash, as he dishes it out from one plate to the other, and it looks particularly yummy, I must say. And sausage and mash, bangers and mash, is a traditional British dish consisting of sausages served with mashed potatoes. It may consist of one of a variety of flavoured sausages made of pork, lamb or beef. And the dish is usually served with onion gravy, but may also include fried onions and peas. In 2009, the dish was listed as Britain's most popular comfort food in a survey commissioned by TV channel Good Food. And although it is often stated that the term bangers has its origin in World War II, the term was actually in use at least as far back as 1919. The term bangers is attributed in common usage in the UK to the fact that sausages made during World War I, when there were meat shortages, were made with such a high water content that they were liable to pop under high heat when cooked. So Darren, it seems, is overstimulated, eager and keen, both with his sitting position and his urgency to speak to Anthony about his sister.
Hey, did you see your kid then?
What?
She had a tit out.
Well, yeah, she was feeding the baby.
Does she do that a lot?
Yeah?
She always used the same tit.
Dunno, I'm not asked.
She had a tit out. I mean, mad that he wasn't aware of this. I guess he had all brothers, as we've established. You know, maybe he could have a sister in there or whatever, but he's the youngest. But yeah, Darren hasn't heard of this, breastfeeding. Not encountered it on a TV show or a book or a lesson at school. And, okay, it kind of makes sense partly now. But the gall to tell this to your friend about his sister as well. Wow. Ant doesn't seem to realise in a way that Darren is gleaning kind of pervy details here. Does she always do it a lot, the breastfeeding, he asks? Is it always the same tit? Ant isn't asked by this, and rightly so. You know, he's indulging Darren with this nice dinner, not his weird fantasies. I mean, maybe he's just curious, I guess. Giving with his food as well. It's even portions, and he flicks the end of the knife so Darren gets an extra blob of creamy mash. And then from here, which is at the 9-minute and 1 second mark in the episode itself, from here, there is 22 seconds of no dialogue, which is surely the longest break ever in the history of the show, I'd say. And here's how it plays out. Anthony puts his plate down and grabs some bread as Darren eats. He plops the slices down, sucks his knife and gets eaten too, and in the background we can hear Ready Steady Cook and, you know, the counting down there. But there's no punchline or even real reason for this scene. I mean, we've established the boys go in to have food, you know, we know there's going to happen sort of thing. But again, this feels to me, I don't want to be cliche and keep harping back to this is a Mike Leigh type thing, but, you know, it feels like it could have came from a British drama, as I like to say. You know, this is what happens also. It's very true to life when people sit down to eat. They don't traditionally jibber-jabber between mouthfuls. I mean, of course, if you go out with friends or whatever, but if you're just with your family, you're normally eating in silence or the odd word here or there. You know, you're kind of been waiting for this food. And there's a real daring to me in the form here, a real recognition by Craig and Caroline that they had had mastered this medium that they had pioneered, and now they could play with the silences in really interesting ways. You know, of course, silence is a giant part of the show, and pauses here and there, but here it's really languished within. Not indulgently, I mean, inherently it's indulgent to watch two boys indulgently eating bangers and mash silently, in quite a ravenous and visceral way, the lips smacking, cutlery clacking, etc. But it isn't boring. It isn't, you know, just artistic with no seeming merit for the whole thing. I mean, frankly, it's marvellous to me, really. You know, it's just great stuff. I mean, maybe I've drunk the Kool-Aid here, and I'm saying how genius it is just to watch two lads eat sausage and mash, but I really think this is ambitious and inspired. And after this artfully artless interlude, we go back into the lounge where there's noise and clamour. Baby David is heading back into his chair after being picked up, and there he's pointed squarely at the TV as Ready Steady Cook is still playing. Denise says she believes the baby will have a musical side because of Dave's DJing, which is hilarious and also an interesting point. I mean, he has a propensity for the Lighthouse family, does Dave, but he isn't really that kind of musician, is he? Not to be superior here, but if he was to have a musical side, surely it would descend from old Jim and his banjo plucking. And then after this, there's a great sequence as Denise ponders further.
I think he's really bright for his age, baby David. What do you think?
Oh, yeah.
What do you think, Dave?
What about?
That baby David's really bright for his age. What do you think?
Yeah, well, bright.
Who's bright?
Baby David!
Proper sketch show vibe to that one, with the stacking responses and the knowing revisitations that a scene like that thrives off. Jim at the end there too, putting a cap on it. And why does Denise think this exactly? I guess every parent thinks this about every child, you know, all around the world in a way.
You know, sometimes, you know, when I look into his eyes, he seems miles away, like he's always thinking things.
Oh, yeah. We do wonder what they're thinking.
And we know
don't
Denise
we?
is talking about baby David here, of course, but of course she could mean David as well, you know, with the far off look in his eyes, wondering what they're thinking. And baby David, poor baby David, it seems that to a certain extent he's the scapegoat already, with Denise saying, he made us have a massive row though last night, didn't he, Dave? I mean, no, you two had the row, but yeah, point aside, Dave listens in as Denise recounts, and the gist of what Denise retells is that Dave wants a trade for the baby, but he's worried if he'll get in, you know, needs a safety net. Barb, though, thinks baby David's a shoo-in, you know, they've already established that he's bright as a button, and it's just utter nonsense, really, in these moments, but it's spewed brilliantly. And then we cut back into the kitchen and there's way more scraping. You know, the boys have been eating at this rate the whole time as we've been hearing about the discord next door. I like as well how in the kitchen a little bib can be seen, folded around the vacant chair opposite Darren and in front of us. The angle here too is static. The tea towels on the left hanging, the cooker grease ever present. There's also a chew toy or something on the table. And I love this low down angle. It's not quite at eye level and it's so intimate. So here in the kitchen, you know, the boys lack manners to a certain extent, but they're amongst friends. Aunt, Darren says, to which Aunt says, what? And Darren responds asking for the red sauce, something we've already discussed on the show before, red sauce. There's still some mash we can see on Darren's plate, so he's going for the tried and tested technique of mixing it all together with some ketchup in a wonderful stew. We're then back in the lounge, and I mean, there's so many cuts here. Reminds me of Barbara's Had Enough. You know, go back and check that episode out in the archives. But we're back in the lounge here, where Denise asks her father for something he'd rather not hear.
Dad, will you pass me one of my nipple pads, please?
Bloody hell, Denise.
Oh, if only Darren was there to hear and see this, you know, these nipple pads. So Jim handles one out of the boots bag with disgust. And Jim just isn't happy, you know, rubs his own fingers on his shirt after hauling it out briefly, you know, one fresh from the packet. But to him, it's dirty, I suppose. And nipple pads, nursing pads or breast pads being a cloth or disposable pad worn across the nipple and breast of a nursing mother to absorb any milk that may leak between feedings. Jim's face is still scowling as Denise is past one and she fits it into a purple top, talking to Barb about going to the precinct with Cheryl. To Denise, the fact she only started leaking in Topshop was funny. Barbara laughs too, but Jim is having none of it, clearly very uncomfortable in his seat. And Topshop, well, Topshop was a British multinational fashion retailer of women's clothing, shoes, makeup and accessories. It had around 510 shops worldwide, of which some 300 were in the UK. It was part of the Arcadia Group, controlled by Sir Philip Green, which went into administration in late 2020. The Topshop brand was then purchased by ASOS on the 1st of February 2021 and now operates exclusively online. So Barb titters on, the cooking programme continues, and we cut to baby David on the floor, who himself has just cut one.
So you know how to do this?
That's my boy. Oh, he's a right, all right.
I hope he's not followed through.
He wrenches. A loud fart is heard. It looks to me like a little bit of footage of him, the baby, about to cry was muted with the background audio playing over the top to give the appearance of him straining. It works seamlessly though. It's only if you're doing a podcast like this that you kind of actually pick up on those sort of things. So Jim notices it first and laughs. And Dave looks a little in shock, that it's come from someone's back end at the front of the room rather than the typical back of the room. Jim claims him as a royal, all right, that's his boy as he just farted loudly and proudly. But Dave is concerned, worried that the baby could have followed through, which is a great phrase, isn't it, following through. So Dave gets on his knees, and again there's a little interplay between the TV and Dave, who, as he grasps his son's bum to smell it, we can see Fern Britton on the TV banging the bottom of a red sauce bottle, a premium glass one rather than the plastic lung that Darren squoze a few moments prior. Jim looks on wearily, and then comes a parade of bum smelling from one of the stinkiest shows on television. Dave smells. Not quite sure. Not quite sure. How could you not be quite sure? I've not got a child currently, but come on. You can smell, right? Denise, again, isn't sure. Is she going to know any better than Dave? But she isn't sure. And Barb is past baby David's bum and obviously knows right away, passes him to Denise, who says he has to be changed. Now, this is a big marker here for me as I'm charting Denise's motherhood, because she's completely capable of doing her share here. But upon saying that he'll need changing, she calls instantly for Anthony, which establishes, I suppose, that Anthony is willing to do it. But Barbara poo-poos, if you will, that idea, as he's still having his tea.
Oh, he's definitely done one.
He's gonna need changing, isn't he? Anthony?
Oh, don't tell Anthony to do it, not while he's having his tea.
I'll do him after I watch this.
Dave, you can't leave him like that. I can really smell it.
Oh, the pacing of that joke is so good. You think, oh well, at least Denise cares somewhat. The prospect of him having to stew in it isn't pleasant at all, and she appreciates that. But it's that she can really smell it, and she actually pops a finger under her nose theatrically, like we've seen before when Dave tracked in dog dirt during Anthony's birthday. And Barbara shoots Denise a judging look here, and we're going to see plenty more of those as Denise's deficient motherhood skills become apparent. It is amazing how she is, though, on some level, and that's what I love about the show, that they make that one of her dominant traits now, that she's so lazy not only as a person, but as a parent. She's actively avoiding helping the child that she birthed. Why do something for it when someone else will eventually do it anyway? So Dave asks for the changing mat, which is a sweet quilted design of animals, that type of affair, and he stoops up in front of the TV as a fish is skinned above a pan. Denise asks Dave if he remembers the Pampers and the wet wipes, again trying to help a bit I suppose, but asking the most obvious questions. Dave came in strapped with the baby bag, so of course he'll have them. He probably brought them himself, and he's the only one who uses them as well, I bet. And Denise doesn't move an inch as Barbara shifts past her with the mat. Yeah, it's Barbara who gets the mat, not Denise. And she's still trying to watch the TV. As is Jim too, whose view is effectively fully obstructed by someone else's arse. So Barb clears the coffee table, and we can see a newspaper and some stray toys. David is then lowered, and Dave gets to work. Gets stuck in. Great acting from Craig Cash here as he dolefully and cartoonishly reacts to the sights and smells. Again, I know I like to put this out there quite a bit, but I do think there's something in the fact that the Royle family is a little bit of a proto-Sopranos in the way that it really likes to use media in the background to subtly comment on the action in some sort of ironic way. So for instance, with Fern Britton on Ready Steady Cook, we can hear her saying, "Can we not watch that bit?" as Dave is changing the nappy. Again, maybe this was intentional, probably wasn't, but it's clever regardless, and I really appreciate it.
Bloody Pampers and bloody wet wipes. It must be costing you a bloody fortune, lad. Yeah.
Can we not watch that bit? No, I'd like to do that bit actually. I like the feel of...
And nappies, or diapers, the first cloth diapers consisted of a specific type of soft tissue sheet cut into geometric shapes. This type of pattern was called diapering and eventually gave its name to the cloth used to make diapers and then to the diaper itself, which was traced back to 1590s England. This usage stuck in the US and Canada following the British colonisation of North America, but in the UK the word nappy took its place, with most sources believing nappy as a diminutive word of the word napkin. Dave then pops the filled Nappy onto the seat of the sofa just to get it out of the way where he's doing other things, but Denise is having none of that. I mean, she's caused all of this uproar because she doesn't like the smell, so she's certainly not going to have it right next to her. But, this is the reality, I'm afraid, of bringing up a little one, and Denise is so ill-equipped and uninterested that it's kind of painful, as we're about to see.
Look at the soft sod. When are you going to start changing the nappies, Denise?
No way. It smells of shite.
Another big pregnant, if you will, look there from Barb to Jim. It's an hysterical response from Denise there, but kind of like Darren, she's just adding a detail. It's not really an explanation like when Darren was saying it was a freezer, not a fridge or whatever. I mean, yet we know that it smells of shite. It is shite. That ain't no revelation or excuse. I mean, what must Barbara be thinking here? She's like her father. That's probably what she's thinking. Jim then talks about the baby as being a royal, as he's like his old granddad in the engine room department, which seems a fair assessment at this point. Baby David, who is cutely dressed on a sweet baby mat. So there's an angle, the camera angle's from above him. And what I love is, at the top left, there is a Domino's ashtray, the ashtray, filled. It's a witty visual contrast there. Laughter is then heard on Ready Steady Cook, and Barb comments on how good Dave is, but Jim says it's not rocket science, is it? Which Barbara counters that he never done it himself, and we have heard of Jim being accused of never going near them when they were young, so it's very unsurprising. Barbara smiles as she shoots this counter shot, and Jim can do nothing but seethe, exaggerated in his chair. Dave doesn't seem to mind, though, singing You Are My Sunshine to the baby as the cooking show continues in the end. Baby David, who looks content, and gets back in his chair as some cottage pie is set on the go on the screen. And You Are My Sunshine being a song copyrighted and published by Jimmy Davis and Charles Mitchell in 1940. And according to the BMI, it has been recorded by more than 350 artists and translated into 30 languages. In 1977, the Louisiana State Legislature decreed that You Are My Sunshine will be a state song to honour two-time Governor Jimmy Davis. And of course, the song is everywhere, and one of the notable ones I want to point out is that in 1997, the Simpsons episode The Secret War of Lisa Simpson features Marge sending a recording of herself singing the song to Lisa, who is homesick while enrolled in a military school. Great episode, and probably, in my eyes, as it is the final episode of Series 8, probably the last episode of the quote-unquote classic era. But yeah, get in touch with me there. Any opinions on You Are My Sunshine, or Ready Steady Cook, or whatever, the Royle Ramble pod@gmail.com. So Barb and Denise smile to each other as Dave sings. Jim just scratches his nose. Dave watches the TV and effortlessly ties the bag himself, the poo bag, and then just chucks it on the floor. There's no diaper genies here. The boys were then back with the boys in the kitchen, and they're on to the second course, that being tearing up bits of white bread and wiping the sauce. I mean, so classic, we've all done this. Apparently it's quite a Brummy thing to have bread with the gravy of a Sunday roast. Let me know if you do that as well via email. But again, this is just stuff that everyone does. Like, think about Dave rearranging his gonads in the first series before he goes to bed. It's just stuff you just never see on TV, but everyone does, So Darren is asking Ant about Emma's fit friend Sophie, and if he'd asked on his behalf if she was interested. It's a little unfair maybe on Ant's part that he perks up somewhat, when he gets asked this, seemingly about to relay some good news, and then he informs Darren that she's not interested. Darren, though, doesn't fancy her anymore anyway. Anywho, that's funnily enough. Calls her a stuck-up cow in addition, and Ant agrees, more for his friend's dignity probably than anything else. And from that slop on the plate, we cut directly to the lounge in front of the TV with some earthier ingredients being shown. Potatoes, cheese, mince. And there's a celebrity contestant as well. It's Bob Holness, who is informing his accompanying chef and the host Fern that he didn't want to shell the peas, so he brought some frozen ones. To which Fern replies with a line that has the whole studio and the Royal front room in hysterics.
No, I didn't want you telling me to shell the peas.
No, sir.
So I got some frozen ones, right?
I'll have a pea, please, Bob.
No.
Now, to understand why this is so funny, in theory at least, is you kind of have to know who Bob Holness is, him being Robert Wentworth John Holness, who lived from 1928 to 2012, who was a British-South African radio and television presenter and occasional actor, most known for presenting the British version of Blockbusters. Blockbusters being a game show featuring a solo player and a team of two. Very unique that it had that. You could go solo, you go with a mate, who answered trivia questions, clued up with an initial letter of the answer to complete a path across or down a game board of hexagons. So clearly I'll have a pee is a reference to what people would regularly say on blockbusters. It was an obvious gag, but a fitting one, and one everyone in the know would appreciate, and everyone does. You know, Dave is howling. Like, the amount of laughter here is just like, again, if this was a later season, I would be making the argument that this is out of character, but because this is the classic era, God, I'm so obsessed with classic eras of TV shows, aren't I? But because it's in this remit, I think it's worth investigating a little bit more. So Dave is howling, looking to Jim, as said. The camera then pans across, and we can see both Barbara and Jim laughing. And Jim then laughs further, pumping his hands. And Dave can be heard laughing like we've never heard him before. It's one of those moments, again, this is like something you don't really see on TV, but we've all experienced, where there's something funny, but because everyone's laughing about it, it just gets funnier and funnier and funnier. And eventually you forget what you're laughing about, but those endorphins, those stomach cramps, they just feel so good, don't they? Even baby David is smiling, and from the floor we can see him looking up as everyone else is just continually bellowing, to the point where their noise is leaking out into the kitchen as Anthony and Darren continue to feast. And then we go back in the kitchen, and they just keep going, they keep laughing. When Darren's mobile rings, we can still hear Dave howling. Darren answers it, and oh man, the ringtone from Darren's phone is classic, in all of its polyphonic glory. Darren chats on, says hello, says he thinks so. Anthony picks his teeth.
Yeah. I think so. Yeah. Defo. Laters.
Who was it?
Bit of business.
Was it your mum?
Yeah.
So Darren does talk to his mom then. I mean, he could have gave Barbara her regards or whatever. And then we're back in the lounge, and they're still laughing it up. It carries across again into Darren and Anthony. Darren, who seems eager to get back in the lounge, not because he hears that's where the action is. Rather, he could, he feels, catch another glimpse of Denise mid-feed. Something Anthony assures him won't be happening. So Darren then just says they should get off then. They can't go straight away, though, Anthony says, as he can't abandon his responsibilities. He needs to make his dad a brew. So we're back into the lounge now. It's a little quieter. On the screen, Ready, Steady, Cook still plays. And Denise lets Barb know about her and Dave's plans for the christening. They're planning a big do, and they're going to invite everyone they know. Again, this is nice. It's setting up a future event, the christening being the end of this series, and definitely one of the all-time best Royal Family episodes. Can't wait to get to that one. And where they're going to host it? Well, obviously, naturally, it's going to be the Royals, isn't it? It's going to be this homestead. Denise says she can't do a buffet and take care of baby David. I mean, that's two things she won't be doing anyway. Jim contests all this. Barb fires back, saying you can't do a buffet for your own grandson, And then we're back in the kitchen again as Anthony's making the brew. Darren's phone goes and he gets excited to listen to a message. Back then, oh God, it was, the thrill of someone getting in contact digitally. One that is, so the message, it's one that's from Anthony that he forgot about. Now, I'm a bit confused by this, actually. So, Anthony texted him and it was a message he could listen to? Or Anthony left an answer phone that only just came through? And Darren forgot all about this because it would have just happened in the preceding minutes, mate. Again, not quite clear how this goes down here, but still a funny little exchange.
Yes, message.
Who was it?
You.
Oh, yeah.
And apropos of nothing really in the lounge, though, to be fair, I guess baby David has just been wiped, Barbara announces that there's nothing better than a baby's bottom. Which is lovely, she really smiles as she says it, delights in the fact, and probably the reality as well that there's one just down there on the floor, for her to clean whenever she wants. Barb remembers Denise's little bottom. Denise laughs, but Jim doesn't join in with the remembrances. Rather, in a funny retort of his own, declares he hasn't seen her bottom since it was little, as she hasn't been off it since. Denise kind of smiles and returns back to the TV. Barbara says that Denise was only £6 when she was born, but Anthony was 7.2 exactly. And these are like the things that mothers remember and never forget, isn't it? I mean, there's lots about babies that people seem to keep in their mind. Like, I'll never forget, I've got a younger sister, and I don't know why, but I'll never forget that she was born at 12:03. It's just, these things just kind of lodge in the mind, don't they? Dave doesn't remember his own weight, though, his birth weight, when asked. Because really, why would you? I mean, I don't know mine. It's not the sort of thing that anything but mothers kind of assign to that archive. So Barbara then sizes Dave up, looks at him close in scrutiny, Says he'd be about, £9 free, something like that, you know. And Jim is behind her, and we can see Jim is not listening at all. He's looking at the cooking show. You know, he who had been in his own space watching some ingredients being whipped up. And then when he's asked, he just fires back heavy.
What do you think, Jim?
What about?
What weight do you think Dave was when he was born?
I don't bloody know. Is it a prize? Bloody hell, Barb. I couldn't give two shiny shites what weight Dave was when he was born.
Why can't you ever have a sensible conversation?
I mean, funny, but Christ, he can't ever have a sensible conversation, can he? I mean, yeah, arguably wondering what weight Dave was when he was born is hardly Alan bloody Wicker, but still. Well, then back into the kitchen, and Auntie's sat up on the worktop, as I'm sure he always has. I mean, that's a classic teen hangout spot, isn't it? And him and Darren are going back and forth, doing an impression of Ali G and his mention of Batty Boys. So what is a batty boy, I hear you ask? Well, in Jamaican patois, batty boy is a slang expression often used to refer to a gay or effeminate man. The term batty man is also used in Belize, owing to the popularity of Jamaican music. The term derives from the Jamaican slang word batty, which refers to buttocks or anus. Post-World War II, Jamaican immigrants brought the term batty boy to the UK, and British comedian Sacha Baron Cohen frequently used the expression in his Ali G character, including in a 2002 interview that led to an apology by the BBC for Cohen's foul language. And Ali G, well, that's Alistair Leslie Graham, better known as Ali G, is a satirical fictional character created and performed by English comedian Sacha Baron Cohen. Originally appearing on Channel 4's The 11 O'Clock Show, and subsequently as the title character of Channel 4's The Ali G Show, which was later on HBO. He's also the title character of the film Ali G in the House. And in the 2001 poll by Channel 4, Ali G was ranked 8th on their list of the 100 greatest TV characters. 8th? I mean, I don't mind Ali G, but there's really, 8th. 8th just seems frighteningly high. I bet he was higher than Jim Royle, and that don't sit right with me. And like Nick in Freezers, Darren just can't do it. The accent, that is.
Me checking out none other than me main man, Anthony Royle.
Hey! No, but the thing is, you was definitely a batty boy because you does not fancy Miss Sophie and she is fit, man.
He gets a little annoyed that he can't, tries and tries again, and then Ant just outperforms him. He's got the voice down pat mostly in his own guise. Ant smartly as well turns Darren's dismissal of Sophie earlier into evidence that he is indeed a batty boy, and also invokes Babylons as his traditional Ali G parlance. This is a long scene in homage to Ali G and a tribute to the indulgence of youthful conversation. Ali G, of course, was ginormous at this point, on the national stage, an icon of British comedy. They do the booyakasha with the fingers, which I cannot do. I'm trying to do it right now on mic. Ant takes his watch off, and they both begin to try to click their fingers in that way. Then back in the lounge, Denise mentions something that will crop up continually through this series, Dave's plans for the farmyard.
You know Dave?
Yeah.
He's making a little farmyard for baby David.
Is he?
Yeah.
Are you, Dave?
Yeah?
Oh, how lovely. What are you making it out of?
A bit of scrap wood I've got.
It's a nice thought from a new dad, no doubt. I mean, he could just buy a farmyard with toys for probably not that much from the early learning centre, which would have still been around back then, But it's about more than that, maybe. It's about creating something, it's about using your hands. Barb offers up some Arran wool for the sheeps if he needs them, but he wasn't really thinking of having those at the farm. This is going to be more of a ducks and livestock kind of thing. And Jim, old Jim, he really just can't help himself.
If you're having a pig, Dave, we could always get Cheryl to model for it.
Dad?
Because of course he gets in an unwarranted jab at old Shezza, her aura and all there, for no real reason. Dave smiles, Jim continues to laugh afterwards, his own big belly bouncing beneath his folded arms. It's more than likely, Dave says, that he'll have chickens, he says to Barbara after she asks, and she says "ah" to herself, before singing the chicken lay a little egg for me nursery rhyme. It's mad as well that she says to Dave, "Are you having chickens?" This is just after they spoke about the farm, seconds after, and he asks where. I mean, kind of amazing his lack of recall.
You having chickens, Dave?
Where?
In your farmyard.
Oh, more than likely, Barbara.
We then careen back into the kitchen, and like I said before, it is really like Barbara's finally had enough here in Structure, but whereas there we had a marriage on the rocks, here we have two gormless youths attempting to do that Ali G hand thing. And it's great that we cut right back on that moment. Darren getting absolutely nowhere, declaring he can't do it anymore, Ant goes to put his watch on and suddenly Darren seems to have cracked it, getting a satisfying click sounding out. Yeah, you've got it better than me, Ant concedes, with a tinge of sadness to it, or perhaps he's just bored. Because, what would teenagers do back then in the late 90s? There were phones, as we've seen with Darren, but no smartphones. We never see Anthony play video games, and I assume Jim and Barbara wouldn't have bought him a PlayStation, and if he did have one, he'd have to have it plugged in downstairs in a lounge, stopping the telly, which would be a no-no. So they do this. They hang out and try and impersonate Ali G, and soon enough they'll be bored enough to even go back into the lounge. And back in the lounge, Barbara asks Dave about his mom and dad. He says they're fine, but there's an anniversary coming up. It'll be a year next month, Dave says, and he seems really down about it. Denise even pats his leg for support, and Barbara herself seems to recognise that this is a heavy occasion approaching. Jim asks what it is, and we learn that it's the anniversary of the dog dying. Jim says now at first, out of respect. We don't know if he had a dog himself as a youth, but we have heard that Barbara did through Norma. The dog committed suicide, we're told. And Jim is tittering to himself at this. He jumped off the balcony, we hear, which has Jim chortling at a subterranean frequency at first. I mean, really, this isn't on, is it? I mean, the death is a bit of a mystery, but Jim is laughing about a dog dying. Dave's family dog, no less. I mean, granted, he's kind of laughing at the ridiculous situation, but still, it's a bit heartless on his part. Something that doesn't seem to bother Dave too much, really. But again, Dave's short-term memory's so shot, he probably forgot Jim even said it. And what is the inference here as well of the dog committing suicide? Is it that the dog, man's best friend, didn't want to be part of the family, so he chucked himself out from up high? Bit of a mystery. It's just something absurd that they just let hang there, and I love it for that. Darren and Anthony then finally return to the lounge, the Pet Shop Boys, as Jim refers to them as, and the Pet Shop Boys being an English synth-pop duo formed in London in 1981, consisting of primary vocalist Neil Tennant and keyboardist Chris Lowe. They have sold more than 100 million records worldwide, and were listed as the most successful duo in UK music history in the 1999 edition of the Guinness Book of Records. They have 5.1 million monthly streams on Spotify too. I didn't realise quite how huge they are. And they've got a lot of interesting history, actually. They're one of the only bands, to my knowledge anyway, where one of them started off as a music journalist, on the other side of the curtain. This being Neil Tennant, he worked for Smash Hits, and apparently an opportunity arose for him to go to New York to interview the Police, and while there he arranged to meet Bobby Orlando, a producer that both he and Lowe admired. Tennant mentioned he was writing songs in his spare time, and Orlando agreed to record some tracks with him. And Orlando subsequently produced the Pet Shop's first single, one of their best known songs, West End Girls. So Jim gets his brew, Anthony gives another to Barb, and charmingly Darren comes in with two, walking carefully, kind of doesn't want to spill any. He points out there's some hair on the floor to Barb as if she wouldn't know it, but it's only Jim's, she says, so it isn't to be concerned with. Darren passes to Dave and Denise too, who accepts it as Daz. She says, thanks, Daz. And Barbara then comments on how nice it is to see him.
Hey, give your mum my love, will you? Hey, has she still got a home help?
I think so, yeah.
Oh, well, she'll need it now, won't she? What with you and your dad being out of work and all your brothers in prison.
She isn't trying to be harsh here, I'm sure. She's a lovely person, Barb. But you can't help but take it a certain way if you're Darren, They may have hair on the floor of this household, but the Raw household is no doubt far more typical and loving than his by the sounds of it. And Darren's movements in this moment are great too. He barely looks at Barb as she speaks and just nods quickly. Poor Mrs. Sinclair Jones as well. Last we heard she was in the hospital, but now it seems like she's out and she requires home help. Denise offers for Darren to hold the baby, but we all know that this isn't something he'd be interested in. Barbara pushes for it, stating that he's probably never held a baby, and Darren actually whispers to Ant, do I have to? I mean, if he doesn't feel comfortable, it's not worth forcing it to, and it's kind of a shame to see Darren cornered here.
Darren, do you want a little load off baby David?
Nah, you're all right, Denise.
Oh, go on, Darren. I bet you've never held a baby, have you?
We have been.
Jim dispels any awkwardness, however, by joking about Darren nicking the baby. I mean, he's joking about someone effectively kidnapping his grandson, but still, it works. Everyone's laughing, everyone's loose, but they've been laughing a lot this episode. Dave asks where they're off to, and it's the pear tree we hear rather than the feathers, as they won't serve Darren in the feathers as he doesn't look 18. Barbara asks if he is, which obviously he isn't. He'd have ID to prove otherwise. So there hasn't been a Darren's birthday then in this universe, a Darren's 18th. And I'm certain that when it does happen in the near future that it won't be a song-filled, though his house may retain the same stank of shite. Anthony is a perceptive guy, he knows when to get Darren out of there, and the two of them then leave soon after this, with Barb passing to Anthony just as he's going the nappy bag to get rid of. It's stinking the house out, Barb says. And Darren then leaves on an upbeat note.
Stick this in somebody's bin, will you, love? Smelling our house out.
Hey, Aunt. Bag of shite. See ya.
Yeah.
Hello.
I guess he's just saying that because it's a saying, bag of shite. Jim laughs in his seat and we can see beside Jim the baby monitor atop a bookcase of sorts. So they head off. Barb looks to the door, comments on how they're good friends and they're always together these days. That's how Liberace got started, Jim says. And yeah, Jim's homophobic. We've established this before. And, he finds mocking gay people very funny. He then talks about Elton John too and how he still drops anchor in Pooh Bay, which is a classic phrase. I'm not saying classic as in that it's, I'm not saying it's classic as if it's great or anything, but it's certainly something that gets said and it's, immortalised in a certain way here. And just those two people that you mentioned, well, Liberace, Zladzlu, I think that's how you say it, Valentino Liberace, who lived from 1919 to 1987, was an American pianist, singer and actor. A child prodigy born in Wisconsin to parents of Italian and Polish origin, he enjoyed a career spanning 4 decades of concerts, recordings, television, motion pictures and endorsements. At the height of his fame from the 50s to the 70s, he was the highest paid entertainer in the world, with established concert residencies in Las Vegas and an international touring schedule. And Elton John, well, Sir Elton Hercules John, born Reginald Kenneth Dwight, is an English singer, pianist and composer with a career spanning 6 decades. Collaborating with lyricist Bernie Taupin since 1967 on more than 30 albums, John has sold over 300 million records, making him one of the best-selling music artists of all time. And I'm sure, like most people listening, I love Elton John. How can you not, really? What a legend. Jim then hypothesises that they may have been shagging Darren and Anthony in the kitchen, hoping it was only a sausage they were sharing. Barb, though, is far more diplomatic, saying she doesn't mind if he's gay, straight or homosexual. He's still our son. And we've heard Barb say something before about this, hadn't she, talking about gay, straight or Australian. She seems to like that rule of 3 there, I think. Jim, however, says that if he sees Anthony with a handlebar mustache, he'll be out there quick. Naturally he's joking, but the inference is that if his son was gay, he would kick him out of the house, which is kind of crazy. Barb then has a go at Jim for his homophobia, invoking the millennium as a means of it not being necessary. And Jim just kind of laughs at her here. I think he just sees that as a silly justification for civility, which it kind of is. It's kind of, the millennium just sort of comes out of nowhere, I guess. But, it was on people's minds back then, and we were just in the aftermath of it. We then hear on the TV Fern talking about red peppers and green peppers, and it's Anthony Worrell Thompson as well as she's chatting to. I can hear his voice there. Remember him? God, there's an old school TV chef. Jim then asks Dave, somewhat slyly, if he wants to join the quote-unquote arse bandits down the pear tree for a jar. And yeah, I'm sure that's the first thing that they would want, those two lads, as they're just sitting down. Jim and Dave heading in. Denise puts down this appeal, though, and of course, when Jim mocks Dave for this, Barbara does just the same.
One of the old thumb, eh, Dave? 1-0, Jim.
Well, you're not going, Jim.
Oh, under the old thumb, eh, Jim? 1-all.
So Jim shuffles in his seat then, talks about his Rockford files, which are piles, and asks if Barb doesn't fancy rubbing a bit more of that cream in, implying that she's done it before, done it recently, which is like, ugh. And also, I guess there's a lesson here from Jim's request for Denise and Dave, as no matter how old a royal gets, you've still got to deal with their arse. And the Rockford Files is, of course, a reference to the American detective drama starring James Garner that aired on the NBC network between September 74 and January 1980, and it's remained in syndication to the present day. In it, Garner portrayed LA-based private investigator Jim Rockford, with Noah Beery Jr. in the supporting role of his father, Joseph Rocky Rockford, a retired truck driver. In 2002, the Rockford Files was ranked number 39 on TV Guide's 50 Greatest TV Shows of All Time. And, I've never seen an episode, but I am aware of it because, as you guys know, I'm a diehard Sopranos fan. And David Chase, the creator of Sopranos, was a writer on the show. And, apparently Rockford Files was kind of a bit of an influence on it in many certain ways. But yeah, I'll have to check that out. So Dave then remembers, forget the drink, Dave remembers that the footy's on tonight and asks Denise if they can go home as he wants to watch it at home. Denise says fine and then gets up, asking what time Barbara will be round, as of course she needs the help. She says about 10 in the morning, a time that Denise cannot conceive of being up for. Barbara asks if she'll be awake and she just says no. An admission that leads to another worried exchange look between the grandparents. And we've spoken a fair bit in this show about the episodes of the Royle Family. When they end is when they most seem like a sitcom, most like something with a laughter track at their close. And this is certainly one for the books.
Hey, Denise?
Yeah?
Haven't you forgotten something?
Oh, baby David. Oh.
Bloody hell.
Yeah, Denise and Dave forget their baby. I mean, Denise, I can believe, she probably barely knows his name, but you'd figured Dave would be more on top of this. But perhaps, he had footy on his mind. And he's been working hard this episode, so you wouldn't really begrudge it. And it's just a great sigil, a great moment, isn't it, that they forget baby David when they bring him over. It's such a clear sign that, they're kind of at odds with parenthood at this point. Okay, and there we have it, guys. So, as always, if you want to help support the show, the Patreon is there. If you want to get in touch with me, the RoyleRamblePod@gmail.com, iTunes, Spotify, YouTube, we're on all the platforms. Tell a friend as well. If you've got a fellow Royle obsessive, let them know about the Royle Ramble. Go back through the archive as well. Check out all the quiz episodes and stuff like that. And I will be back next month for babysitting again, but if you just can't wait, hop on the Patreon, help support, and listen right now. All right, this has been Tom, as always. Appreciate you guys for listening. Take it easy. Bye. Tom Quee presents The Royle Ramble, an episode-by-episode celebration of the classic British sitcom, The Royle Family. To get in touch with the show, email us at theroyleramblepod@gmail.com.